Thank you for joining us at ChristianPhotoshops.com. Today we're going to be doing a Photoshop tutorial, and this one is going to be a kind of a surreal landscape with some rolling grassy hills. And this is the finished product. So just kind of a grassy hill landscape, several hills with a path, and it's going to lead in between the hills. And at the very back of the picture is just a single tree, and it's sitting on top of the hill. We have some clouds in the background. So it's only going to require 4 pictures to create this image, 4 very ordinary pictures. So we look forward to doing this tutorial, so let's get started. Alright, we have our blank canvas out, so let's go and get started. The 4 images we're going to be using, I'll go ahead and show you those. The first one is a grassy field. This one is just taken out a golf course, but this can be taken anywhere. Just a nice block of grass is all you need. We're going to need a tree. This is just a stock image of a tree, and you can find them all over the internet, or you can just go and take a picture of a tree. We need a texture, just kind of this kind of rough rock texture. And then finally we need something for the sky. So this is a picture taken at the beach. Just some clouds at sunset. So there's our 4 images: the grass, the tree, the texture, and then the sky. So let's go and get started. I've got the blank canvas open, and before I get started, I like to go ahead and make a quick drawing of what I'm looking for. So this picture is going to have some kind of rolling hills and a tree in the background and some clouds in the sky. So let me just make a really quick rendering of what I'm looking for. So just maybe a hill right there, and then another grassy hill behind that one, and then maybe another hill right here, and then one last hill right there. And then in the very back we'll have kind of a hill, a round hill, and there'll be a tree. And then in the sky we'll just have some clouds, and then kind of have the light source right here. Alright, so that's a really quick outline of what we're going to try to draw, some just grassy hills that lead up to a tree in the final hill. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to start making these grassy hills. And the way to do that is we're going to go to our grass picture. We're going to cut out a rectangle of the grass. So just take your selection tool, draw out a rectangle of the grass. Make sure you don't get anything else but grass. Don't get the trees or the tree shadows or anything else in the background. Just make sure it's grass. And then just move that, Control C, and then paste it right in here. So we have a grassy hill. Well, we have the grass texture that we're going to turn into the hill. And so this is going to be the very front. So we're going to go ahead and start. This is the first hill. And we want to, let me put it behind this. We want to make this grassy layer go into this hill that I kind of drew earlier. So the way to do that is to go to Edit, Transform, and then Warp. And what this tool does is you can warp this rectangle to pretty much any shape you want. So we're going to have to make it a hill. And so this top part right here, this is going to be the top of the hill. So just drag that up. And this is the bottom of the hill. So what we're going to do is just drag that down. And you can play with all these boxes and how far you pull it down and which direction you pull it down. And you're just warping this grass into a shape other than the rectangle that we started off with. So I'm not going to get quite exactly on my little outline, but just a nice curved hill is what we're going for right here. Alright. That looks pretty good to start off. I'm not exactly on my outline. That's okay. You can always change halfway through your creation. I think that looks good right there. Alright, so there's our first hill. So all we did was we turned that rectangle grass into kind of a curved, a sloped hill. Now, I want to go ahead and make the hill behind it. So what we're going to have to do is get another grass layer. So go ahead and go back to your grass layer, copy it, paste it in here. And this one's going to go behind the first one. So go ahead and drag that to the bottom. So this grass hill right here is going to be behind. So we're going to do the exact same thing. Let me get my template up. We're going to go to warp, make it a little bit smaller first. We're going to go to warp, so go to edit, transform, warp. Same thing, just kind of pull it down to that shape that we defined earlier. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just kind of reminds you what you're trying to draw here. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. Let's take away the outline, see how that looks. Alright, so we have two hills right here. We have the front hill, we have the back hill, and we want to add a couple more. So we're just going to repeat the same thing. Go to your grass layer, copy that rectangle over, bring it to the back, and then just trying to follow the guideline that you painted earlier and start creating these hills for this grassy field we're making. Edit, transform, warp. Same thing. Just kind of bring it up in the top, lower it in the middle, and lower it even more on the edges. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright, so we have three hills so far. Let's go ahead and create one more. Okay, and what I'm going to do to this one to try to mix it up a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and go to edit, transform, and flip horizontal. And that way we have a little bit different coloring on this side. So go ahead and bring that to your bottom and look at your outline again. Go to edit, transform, warp, and same thing we did for the first three hills. Just use your warp tool and just create a nice little hill, just a sloping hill. All right, let's hit the check mark and let's see how this looks so far. All right, we've got four hills right there. You can always move the hills around if you want to move them lower or higher. Move them to the left or to the right, whatever you want to do to kind of just create this landscape. And we're going to do some dodging and burning later to create the light, change the light pattern on it. But right now that looks pretty good. We got four hills going. All right, we want to create a grassy patch for the very bottom of the picture. So go to your grass layer again, copy and paste it, and this one's going to go on top. So go ahead and bring this all the way down to the bottom. And this is going to be the very foreground of the field. So what we're going to do is put the grass in the spot that you want. Think about right there is going to be good. And then we're going to create a mask, use our brush, and then we're going to erase the edges of this grass so it kind of blends into those hills that we made. So just take a nice soft round brush, go to your mask for this layer, and just paint away those edges. And by doing that, you are blending the grass hill with this grass foreground that we just created. So just very carefully paint on the edges. And just like that, we have a nice flat grass surface that's going right up into the hill. And all we're doing is just masking out part of that original grass layer at the bottom. Alright, that looks good right there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add that last layer with the tree, where we have the tree, so a nice round hill in the back. So again, go to your grass layer, take this rectangle, bring it right in here. It's going to go to the very back. So we have a nice grass layer in the background, and we want it nice and curved, almost like a circular curve. So what we're going to do is kind of bring it right there, go to Edit and Transform. Actually, before we do that, we're going to take this off. Go to Edit, Transform, go to Warp, but instead of moving it around with your cursor, what we're going to do is go to your Custom Warps, go up here and go to Arch. And what that does is it makes a nice arch of your grass. And we don't want it quite that strong, but you can just take that little box right here, pull it down to maybe about like that, and then drag it down, and then we have a nice round hill centered in the back of the picture. So our tree is going to go on top of that, and we'll add that later, but this is our last grassy hill, so we'll go ahead and put that in the background right there. And looking good so far. So we got our flat grass, we got 4 hills, and then leading up to the last hill, and the tree is going to go on top of that. So this is a good starting point. Next thing we're going to do is go ahead and add the background, which is the cloud. So go to your cloud picture, your sunset picture, and just move that. Just move that into the very background of your picture. And there's a lot of colors down here at the bottom we don't want to get rid of. So what we're going to do is we're just going to reduce the size of the sky. So just drag it up. We don't want that horizon in there, but maybe just like that. And that looks good, but I think I want the sun to be on the right side. So we're going to go ahead and flip that horizontal. That looks good. So we got our light source is on the right side. The left side is more dark. And so we'll have to remember that when we start painting our shadows on the hills. But we have our background. And now we can go ahead and start dodging and burning these hills and kind of makes it line up with the light source a lot better. So let's go ahead and just start with the bottom one. This hill right here on the bottom, the very first one we created. We're going to go ahead and dodge and burn that one. And the way I like to do that is go to your adjustment layer, go to curves, clip it to that layer. So when we adjust the curves, it only adjusts that grass layer. And what we're going to do is first we're going to start off and make it light. So go ahead and bring your curves up and make it very light. So the entire hill is going to be light. Go to your mask, do Control I. That turns the mask off, so your mask is completely blacked out. Now get your brush, change it to white, and your opacity we're going to do about 15%. And then we're going to draw back that curve adjustment. So we're going to pretty much draw back some light parts. So I'm just going to draw some light parts of this hill. And our light source is on the right side of the picture. And so that would make sense that your right side of the hill is going to be the most lit part of the hill. So go ahead and draw some light source on that side of the hill. And we're going to add a shadow in a second on the left side of the hill. But this is where the sun and where the light source would be hitting the hill the most. So just draw some nice light streaks right here on the edge. And don't overdo it. You don't want this, the sun's not very strong, so you don't want to make it very bright, but just you want to define the light from the shadow. Alright, that looks good. And this is off, this is on, off, and on. So we got a nice light source right here. Go back to that layer, add another curves adjustment, and this time bring it down. So we're making the entire hill dark, but we're just going to bring it down about like that. Control I to mask out your curves adjustment, and the same white brush we're going to paint in that dark part of the hill. Your dark part of the hill is going to be back here to the left where the sun the light doesn't reach it. So go ahead and paint in some dark spots. Right in here. All right, and that's pretty much all we have to do with that one. So this hill reflects the light source. We got light on the right side, we got dark on the left side. And if you ever need to come back and tone them down, you have your layers and you can always just tone them down appropriately. All right, next one we're going to do is go to the very bottom grass layer, this layer down here. Same thing, create a curves adjustment. We're going to start with the dark first, so go ahead and pull it down. About like that. Invert it out, and then just paint where there would be a shadow. I think there would be a shadow right in this area because of that hill is blocking the sun. So just kind of paint a dark area right in here, maybe right over here, down here at the bottom. All right, and then go to your curves again, and then we'll make it bright. Invert it out, and then paint some right in here. This little valley right here would be where some light would hit, so just paint appropriately on here. All right, and if you ever think you've done too much, you can just take your opacity down. So this is none, and this is full, and you can always just bring it down to like 50% or whatever you think would be good. All right, that looks good right there. Let's go to our next grassy hill, which is going to be this one right here, the second hill that we created. Same thing, go to your curves, clip it to the layer. We'll start with our light one, make it bright, invert it out, and then just paint on the edges. Paint the parts that would get light. So especially the top of the hill on the top right would get a lot of light. And then as you go down the hill, you would get less and less light. So just try to figure out where the light would be hitting the hill at, and then paint accordingly. Then once you have the light part, go ahead and make a dark one. So go to curves, bring it down, invert it out, and then paint especially down in here where it's going to be really dark because the sun is not getting there. So you're just painting the dark curve adjustment in the bottom. And I think we painted too much, so we're going to bring our opacity down, maybe about right there. And as you're painting this, you can realize that it's dark right here and it's light right here, so you can always go back to the first layer that you made, and you can paint in some dark shadows right here so it kind of makes more sense with the lighting. So we can just add some dark shadows right in here. Maybe not quite that much. All right, let's go to the next hill, which is this one right here. Same thing, go to your curves, make it brighter, invert it out, and then paint all those spots that would be lit up by the sunset, which would be the right side of the hill. Alright, that looks good. We're not going to do a dark curve for that one. Let's go and go to the last hill. This one right here in the back. Curves adjustment. Go to bright. Make it bright. Invert it out. And then especially the top of this hill. Oops. There we go. The top of this hill is going to be very bright because the sun is hitting it. So paint accordingly. And I've painted too much, so I'm going to mask a little bit of that out. Alright, that looks good. And we got one more hill, and that's that final hill in the background. So go to curves, brighten it up. And just paint on the right side. Okay, and I am going to create a dark curves also. So go and create a dark curve, invert it out, and then paint right here on the bottom. Turn that down. Alright, so we've got a good outline of the grassy hill so far. And we can go back and adjust that if we feel like the lighting is wrong or anything else is wrong with it. We can always go back and adjust that. But I think for the most part, that's a good starting point. So I'm going to put all of these grassy layers in a folder. We'll just call it grass. And just move all of the grassy layers in that. Okay, that just kind of cleans it up a little bit better. Alright, so back to our original drawing. We have the tree in the very center of that hill. So we'll go ahead and bring in the tree. So go to your picture of the tree, and what you're going to have to do is cut that out from the background, and there's a lot of different ways to do that, and we're not going to go through that in this tutorial, but I've already cut out the tree from the background, so go ahead and drop that into your picture. Resize it down, and we still have the grass from the original picture, but we're going to use that to blend it in. Go ahead and size it down, and kind of figure out what size you think the tree should be, and that all depends on how the perception of how you created the hills. I think about that size right there would look good. Let's zoom in. And we're pretty much going to put the tree right in the center. About right there is where we want it. And we're going to have to erase all that grass from the original tree image. So all you can do is create a mask, change it to black, okay. And just erase out those pictures, the part of the picture that's got the grass in it, and we'll blend it right into our background. And go ahead and clean up some of this selection here. Alright, and once you have a good selection of the tree, and we got it right in the background. We're going to start making a shadow. So let's back out and see how it looks so far. So the tree is in the right spot, but it needs to be, the coloring needs to be different. It's a very bright green color, which does not make sense for the lighting. So let's go ahead and fix that on the tree. So I'll go ahead and add a levels adjustment layer, mask it to the tree. I'm going to bring my white slider to the left just a little bit, make it darker, and then I'm going to take my black slider and go to the right. Not quite so much though. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Now I'm going to go and add a curves adjustment, bring it down just a little bit, and then I'm going to mask it out in a second, but before I do that I'm going to go to my hue and saturation. I'm going to lower the saturation just a little bit. Alright, back to your curves. The light source is on the right side, so what we're going to do is we made the tree darker, so we're going to mask out the right side just a little bit. Change your opacity to about 15% or so, and just paint out parts of the right side of the tree. Okay. Alright, make another adjustment. We're going to curves, make it brighter. Like that. And then mask it out and then erase part of the mask on the right side of the tree. So the brightest part of the tree is going to be the right side to reflect that light from the sun. Alright, let's back out, see how that looks. So now you have the right side of the tree is light and the left side is dark, and you can enhance it a little bit more if you want to. I think that looks okay like that. Next thing we're going to do is create a shadow for the tree. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to control click the tree, which gives me the shape of the tree. I'm going to, on my new layer, I'm going to fill it with black. Deselect, and now I have a black layer of the shape of the tree. Let me zoom in. What we're going to do is we're going to flip it vertically right there, and the tree shadow is not going to come straight down because the sun is not right behind it. The sun is to the right, so we're going to slide it over to the left because the light source is on the right. So just slide it appropriately. You can change the size of it, bring it down a little bit, maybe even slide it even more that way. Okay, that looks good right there. And then what we're going to do is blur it just a little bit. So go to Gaussian blur, go to about, well, just 3 or 4 pixels, not a lot. And then go to your mask and make a large brush, not that large. And then go about 15 or 16%, and then you're just going to erase part of the shadow. You're going to erase more the furthest away from the tree and less up close to the tree. Alright, that looks good. It's a very faint shadow, but it looks realistic for the most part. You can always bring back the shadow just a little bit, just to kind of define it a little bit better. And another thing you can do is go to your filter, your blur, your motion blur, and you can kind of change the blur to the direction of the light. So in this case, it would be kind of a 45, 30 degree angle, something like that. And you can send the blur kind of like that. That looks all right. Paint back just a little bit more. Oops. Paint back a little bit more of the shadow. All right, and just to fine tune the shadow, we're going to go into the tree. Okay, we're going to go right into the tree, and then what we're going to do is create an adjustment layer above it. Change your curves to very, very dark, almost silhouette. Inverse it, and then we're going to paint on the left side of the tree all the way down to the base of the tree. But the right side is going to be left untouched because that's where the sun's at. So just paint the left side of the tree. Just like that. And if you want to, you can go ahead and brighten up the right side of the tree. So just brighten it. And just brighten that side up just a little bit. Alright, that looks good. Finally go back down to your shadow and paint some more of your shadow right there. You can even create a new layer. Kind of paint some black parts of your shadow to kind of line up with the tree just a little bit better. Okay, now the tree is going to be very small, so most people aren't even going to see it anyway, but it adds to the realism when you have the shadow correctly. Alright, so there's our zoomed out image. We got our tree, we got the shadow of the tree, we got all our hills and the lighting. And you can leave the image like that if you want to, or you can just go ahead and do some fine tuning if you want. For example, this layer of the grass, this bottom layer, it's got a very hard edge right there, and we can see what it looks like to kind of remove part of that hard edge. So you can just take a soft brush, go to your mask, and just kind of remove part of that hill so it looks like it kind of blends into that hill behind it. and then what you do is just bring back a little bit of that hill. Just kind of blend it right in there. And it might look better, it might look worse. You can always just play with it, see how it looks. Another thing you can do is you can add some shadows to the hills. So if you if you go above your grass folder, create a layer right above it, and then take your black brush, kind of low opacity. Actually, instead of black, what we're going to do, kind of select a greenish color, a dark green color, and go to multiply, and just paint in a larger brush, and then just kind of paint some spots where there would be dark shadows from the hills. Alright, and then bring that back out just a little bit. And this is just kind of fine-tuning your lighting for the picture, just kind of bring it all together. Alright, so this is before and after. Just a little bit of light being added to the hills and the shadows. You could go back and fine-tune some of your dark spots on the hills. For example, this one right here, you could kind of paint. See, this one right here, you could kind of paint some dark spots at the base of this hill, just kind of define it from the other hill. Looks good. Turn that down just a little bit. And you could spend a long time just playing with the grass and the hills and making it a little bit more realistic, but I think that's a pretty good product right there. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and flatten this image. Make sure you save it before you flatten it, but go ahead and flatten the image. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a nice little pathway going up into the hillside. So the best way to do that is take your pen tool, create a new layer, and then you're going to just draw a very basic outline of where you want your path to be. So I'm thinking kind of drawing it right here, then making maybe a little curve, and then going behind this hill, and then just paint backwards. Maybe something like that. Just a quick drawing right there. And this is where the path is going to go. And I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. Okay, so we have our little outline right here. And what we're going to do is go to our texture picture, which is this right here. Drag this to our image. So we have our texture, and we're going to clip it to that path we just drew. So just bring the texture down, pull out your bottom arrows. We're kind of making a trapezoid type picture here, so the perspective is going to change a little bit. Just bring it down as low as you can. That looks good right there. Alright, so we have our pathway, and just ignore all this little lines right here. That's not a big deal. Slide this down. Alright, so we have our pathway, and it looks like it's just sitting on top of the grass. So we're going to blend that in to make it look more like it fits into the grass. And the way to do that is to go here and put a mask on your shape that we drew. And so what we're going to do is we're going to erase part of that shape. So if you were to erase part of the shape, the grass would come through. And the best way to do that, I think, is just to use a brush, kind of like I like to use the kind of the grunge brushes that look kind of like this, no particular shape. And then go to your brush panel, change your shape dynamics and your size jitter and your angle jitter, and then when you draw a line, it's not a nice smooth line. It's got kind of a rough image to it. So use that brush, go to your mask. We'll zoom in here. And just start painting on the edges. And so this is going to kind of make it look like where the, oops, start painting on your edges right here, and it's going to look like the grass is coming in to the pathway. So kind of use a big brush here at the beginning of the path to about right there. Go to your other side. And just kind of paint randomly on the edges, because this is going to be like how the grass is coming in. Alright, and then once you get further away, make your brush just a little bit smaller, and then keep painting on the edges. And this is going to change that smooth line that we had to a nice rough line that would look more like a old pathway or a grass overtaking the pathway. So just keep painting on the edges. Sometimes you can go out into the pathway, sometimes just kind of hug that line. Okay. Once you get even further out, make your brush even smaller. Okay. And just keep painting on the edge. Make sure you don't have any straight lines, because they will be noticed very easily by someone looking at your finished work. So make sure there's not really many straight lines on there. We're almost at the end of the pathway, so our brush is getting even smaller. Alright, let's see how that looks. Alright, we're going to have our brush, our pathway kind of go behind that hill right there, and so we're going to have to move the pathway so it looks like it goes right behind that hill and then disappears. So maybe about right there. And then you can always just paint on the pathway to make it look more like it's disappearing. Alright, there's our pathway, and it looks alright, but it still looks a little fake, and that's because it looks like there's the grass patches on the right and left side of it are not casting any shadow. So the way to add a shadow to it, go above your texture, add a layer, clip it to there. You can keep the same brush if you want to, just make it slightly larger and change your opacity down to about 20%. Make sure it's black, and then all you're going to do is just paint a 20% black layer on the edge of the grass. And so this is going to serve as your shadow for the grass. Right on the edge, make sure it's really dark. You can even go up higher on your opacity and just kind of paint some dark spots here under the grass, so it looks like there's a shadow casting underneath those little clumps. And pay attention to your light source, because the light is coming from the right side, and so you're going to have a shadow on the left side of the grass. But right here, this part of the grass, we wouldn't see the shadow because we're on top of that. We'd be looking down. So we can't really see the shadow there all the way to about right here. And then we can start seeing the shadow again from the grass. So right here we would not see a shadow because we're on top of it. So don't draw a shadow there. But then obviously right in here we would see the shadow. Okay, and there are some spots where we would see shadows on this side of the path, kind of like right here in this little cove we would see a shadow. Maybe like right here we would see some, and then you can just paint a few spots where there might be a shadow. Maybe the grass is a little bit higher. Alright, that looks good. I'm going to bring the opacity down just a little bit, maybe about 85% or so. Create another layer on top of that, clip it, change your brush to a nice smooth brush, lower your opacity even more, and then we're going to paint just a very faint shadow on top of our surface shadow. So just go around your grass area and just paint a shadow to give it some height. Don't make it too dark. And let's back up and see how that looks. Alright, so we actually got some depth to our shadow, to our path now, so it looks like it's actually sitting in there. Want to create just a little bit more. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my texture layer. That pathway is much too bright for this picture, so go to your curves adjustment. Oops. Make sure everything is clipped in there. Go to your curves adjustment, bring it down just a little bit, and then erase the parts, the lighter parts, which would be the left side of the pathway. Another adjustment you can do if you think it's too much contrast, you can go to your levels adjustment, bring your blacks in just a little bit, and bring your whites in just a little bit, and that just lowers the contrast down. It kind of blends into the background a little bit better. All right, I think that's pretty much everything we're going to do to this picture. Make sure you save it. And the last thing I want to do is some color adjustment. So we're going to flatten the image. The first layer the adjustment layer I'm going to add is I'm going to go to adjustment layers and do exposure. I'm going to reduce my exposure just a little bit. We're going to go about maybe 0.5 or so. Change my gamma correction. We'll go over to the right just a little bit, about 0.9 or so. The next adjustment layer, we're going to do our curves. And we're going to bring this down just a little bit and bring this up just a little bit. And that just added some contrast. Made our darks a little bit darker, our whites just a little bit wider. Next thing I'm going to do is go to your hue and saturation. I'm going to lower the saturation a little bit. We'll go down to about -20 and then change the lightness up to about 10. Okay, I'm going to duplicate my background layer, bring it to the top. So this is your before and after. Go to soft light for your blending mode and change the opacity to about 45%. Right, then I'm going to go to my original background layer, go to adjustments, shadow and highlights. I'll leave my shadows the way they are, but I'm going to take my highlights and bring them in just a little bit. Okay. Then I'm going to duplicate my background layer, bring it to the top, go to Filter, Other, High Pass, do about 2 pixels, overlay, and then duplicate it again and overlay it again. So that just sharpens the entire image, just brings everything together. Next thing I'm going to do is go to background, duplicate that, bring it to the top, go to Filter, Filter, Render, Lighting Effects. Do your light type as Spotlight, bring it to your top right, and this is just going to amplify that light source that we have. So bring it about right there. Click OK. And then bring down your opacity. And this is kind of creating a vignette on the picture with the light source on your right side. So about 30% or so. Last thing we're going to do, create a new layer. Go to your gradient tool, and we're going to make a radial gradient with the yellow in the center and the blue in the background. Go to your very top corner, actually go to about right here where the sun would be, drag it all the way over here. So we got our yellow sun with our blue shadows. Go to your blending mode, change it from normal to soft light, and then just tone that down just a little bit. Alright, actually we're going to do 2 more things. Go to gradient map, change it to kind of a blue, to a tan type color. Change your blending mode to color. Change your opacity down to about 25%. Go to another gradient map. This one's going to be black and white. Change it to soft light. This adds a lot of contrast to the picture. We don't want that much contrast, but we do want a little bit more. Change it to about 20%. And then last thing, this pathway is a little too bright. So what I want to do is create a new layer. And we're going to add just go to your gradient tool, do a black to transparent, and we're just going to add just a nice black gradient on the bottom. Maybe not that much, but then bring it down to about 20–30%, and then do one more, and then bring it down. All right, that looks good. Let's go ahead and put everything, all our edits in a group. And this was our before image, and then when we added the color adjustments, here we go. So we've got a nice colorful image that you might like better, or we have a kind of a dramatic color image right here. So I think we'll call this a finished Photoshop. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please contact us, and we appreciate you coming to Christian Photoshops.